If not already obvious from the content of this channel, I have a passion for the horse and musket era and for American history. There are just so many similarities and challenges faced as former colonies of the British Crown, for better and for worse, even with one another, whether that be with Honaheke receiving inspiration from an American patriot, obtaining the stars and stripes and flying it from his canoe, with this serving as inspiration for the cutting down of the British flag at Flagstaff Hill, and in protest to the signing of the Treaty of Waitangi of 1840, or to the 1951 Security Treaty of ANZAC that fell into disrepute with New Zealand's ban on nuclear materials. Nevertheless, even if at odds, throughout the many exchanges, one could never forget the bravery and heroism exhibited by those Americans who fought through the European and Pacific theatres of war in support of the Allies in confronting the horrors of the Third Reich and imperialist Japan respectively. With 2001's Band of Brothers, I absolutely love that series. We'll continuously binge watch it, and it stirs of a certain patriotism for America, even if not American, like no other series in recent memory. While not as impressive, give it a solid silver medal, I also thoroughly enjoyed 2010's The Pacific, and upon announcement for 2024's Masters of the Air, you bet I was excited. Unlike 2023's Napoleon, where my expectations were understandably rather low, this was not the case for this supposed third installment, a possible completion to the trilogy. Well, unlike Band of Brothers and The Pacific, and to become once again that grumpy critic, I did not particularly care for Masters of the Air. Pardon my French, but what a shit show. For me, it is akin to 2001's Pearl Harbor, and it might be even worse than that. Think I'd prefer to watch Pearl Harbor in earnest, considering it's a feature-length runtime rather than the extent of a full series. I really struggled with this one from the outset, and it was a grind to finish. To try and begin with the positive, the visual effects are impressive. There's a real sense of the claustrophobia within those Boeing B-17 flying fortresses, and to the horrors these courageous men faced when confronted with the strength of the German Luftwaffe. My full respect and admiration to those brave fellows and to their sacrifice. Now, and to begin with the elephant in the room, where they did the boys of the RAF dirty, where the creators could not help but lean initially into the cliché of portraying the British airmen as pompous, gentrified and antagonistic. At first, this didn't really bother me, was more of the same drivel, worthy of just a mere shrug. What else is new, right? There are many accounts where there'd be clashes between testosterone-driven younger men, and to the jealousy of British fighters who thought the Americans were
oversexed, overpaid, and over here.
Why not have some argy-bargy?
Get some candy at their Target at night. What I tell you, pay up.
But then it just would not let up.
It turns out that they don't like the English much either.
Think our boys did this? Looks like it just happened. RAF. Shit. Brits actually hit something for once.
Yeah, maybe if we weren't under the tyranny of your king for 500 years, we could have popped it out sooner.
I kind of half expected Colonel Tavington to somehow make a reappearance.
Would you like a lesson, sir, in the rules of war?
The rank hypocrisy on show frankly became sickening. The condemnation for these poor buggers fighting since 1939, often from humble backgrounds across the British Empire, having endured the horrors over that time, including the defence of their own homes with the Battle of Britain in 1940. Forgive me for a moment for having some pride in my home and nation. Keith Park, nicknamed the Defender of London, would serve Great Britain with esteem and honour through this pivotal engagement as one of its major commanders. New Zealand, like many colonies of the British Empire, would make the biggest of sacrifices in service.
Woohoo! USA! USA! USA!
One can quickly become sick and tired of this heliocentric worldview. And to make it crystal clear, no, the Americans did not win the Second World War on their own. They had quite a lot of help. I'm not begrudging the flinging of poo here and there, but how about some balance? You'd come away from this series thinking that the RAF were heinous villains or incompetent buffoons. What of the characters? With Band of Brothers, you had a plethora of characters who left an impact from the cool, calm, and collected Major Richard Winters, the cynical, albeit likeable and intelligent Lewis Nixon, the humble and quality leadership that was exhibited by Carwood Lipton, the affable and youthful, soon-hardened Donald Malarkey, the Cajun doc Eugene Rowe, the strong, silent type Denver Randleman, and the master impressionist himself, George Luz, and that is only to name a few. With the Pacific, there's the literary enthusiast and hopeless romantic that is Robert Leckie, the at first glance innocent with a heart murmur, devastated to be left behind, then becoming the hardened southern lad Eugene Sledge, the iconic hero and Medal of Honor recipient John Basilone, and the peculiar, somewhat unhinged Snafu Shelton. What of Masters of the Year? Well, you have this Elvis impersonator, intent on milking his Elvis impersonation for all it's worth. Is it a good impression? I can't proclaim myself an Elvis expert, but it is an odd choice for Masters of the Year. All I could see through Austin Butler's performance was, well, this. You then have a Brit, one that I recognised from a 2016 remake of Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace, in Callum Turner. His American accent is fine, I guess. Not entirely convincing, but whatever. They are also called Buck and Bucky respectively.
So let me get this straight. You're Buck, and he's Bucky. Yeah.
You would be right in thinking that could become quickly confusing, especially since both characters are devoid of personality. In their defence, they blend adequately enough within the wallpaper of bland and forgettable. Or if you like male eye candy, for the ladies, or for the gents who happen to swing that way, well, I guess they're kind of pretty. Look like they belong on a catwalk rather than up in the air fighting the Luftwaffe. What of the rest? Well, there's Anthony Boyle, who plays Lieutenant Harry Crosby. He quickly becomes the stereotypical character who initially can't keep his lunch down, but then becomes recognised for his capabilities with navigation. He has relations with a British spy, he has a best friend he loses named Bubbles, sure it is sad, and well, whatever.
I don't care anymore. I'm joking. I never did.
What else? Well, you must include some diversity, and so the show introduces the Tuskegee Airmen. What a crock. The Tuskegee Airmen is a remarkable story in its own right, a history of heroism and sacrifice. Instead, let's shoehorn their story into the final few episodes, explore of racial tensions, establish of some mutual reconciliation between major characters who are tolerant. You see, the Buckies are the good guys. Like them. I know they have the personality of a toilet roll. Please like them, they're great characters, I promise. When people talk of wokery, well, this is my beef with this entire movement in cinema. Perhaps I might be a racist bigot or a misogynist, but sign me up for an entire series on the Tuskegee Airmen. Frankly, this is yet another disservice, presents as a box-ticking exercise, and it's rather boring at this point. Have I also mentioned how Masters of the Year is horribly boring? Unfortunately, one episode veers into the next with one new mission after another. It would seem like we've seen this all before, and in the prior episode to be precise. Will these flyers survive, succeed in their mission, return to HQ for crumpets and tea? This sort of thing could work if you cared about the characters. But I don't care for the $2. The rest really haven't much time afforded to them either, and for us as the audience to connect with and to relate. For mine, the most interesting character might be Nate Mann's Robert Rosenthal. I'm not entirely certain why, just that he wasn't such a cardboard cutout caricature bereft of personality. Where we would find him engaging with those dealing with the trauma upon receiving leave was among one of the more interesting narrative strands. When it is slim pickings, one must do what he can to retain some semblance of interest. Frankly, Masters of the Year is sadly a waste of time and potential. If not following in the footsteps of Band of Brothers and the Pacific, perhaps I may not be so scathing. But it is still boring, at points insulting, and did I also mention how it is just simply so bland and boring? So no, it was not enjoyable. More resembles the Godfather Part 3 of the Band of Brothers trilogy, although I do find that somewhat of an insult to the Godfather Part 3.
Just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in.
Well no, if not already evident, I'm most certainly out.